Hey guys. So we had 2 months off. Which I was pretty bummed about, but I don't know about y'all, but I had a good relaxing time off. I actually took, I think 3 weeks off. It's probably the longest I've taken off consecutively in my whole life. It felt great. I went to Turkey with Michael over here. We went to Istanbul and it was really great. And came back kind of really hungry and inspired to get back to this space because I just love being here so much, and even 3 weeks away was a bit long for me, but it was rejuvenating. I hope the same for y'all. While we were away, I got a new kitchen. This is my first big meal in a kitchen that I love cooking in. For the new people, yes, I am this awkward, and I'm not good at these parts. But I love this. I really love having you guys here. I love hosting in general, and hosting engineers. You know, this is my favorite thing. We all get to eat like shit in studios unless we got the sugarfish budget. And we're about to live it up with a Middle Eastern feast tonight that I have made for you. So thanks for coming to Conversations. Pretty pumped about this. And we'll get to the conversation in like an hour. Thanks, Jon. Man,
look at this.
We're making a movie.
Look at this.
We're trying something new this year. I feel like it's important to document things that we're discussing because not everyone gets to come to this event. I think that there's so much value from what we discuss that it would be nice to figure out a way to share it. I would like to document what we do, and then at some point release cuts of it, maybe whole thing, depending on the candidness of the conversation. We did the Tony one in November, and it went so well. We're almost done with that. He was traveling a bunch, but we're going to release that one for everybody, and that's going to be really exciting for those that didn't come, and for younger students and people that don't necessarily get invited to learn from. That brings us to 2020, and I'm pretty excited to have gotten here. Feels different. I'm not one to really think about time very much. I don't really think about the past, and I don't think about the future. I'm supposed to, probably, because maybe there's good things to come if I were to think about what they could be. But I know that something feels different, and I feel more energized, so we're going to share it. And tonight will be the first of our interview series with Spider and Rory from Unfuck Project. Is that a working title, or are we moving forward with that?
I don't know. See how tonight goes.
Yeah. So I thought the best way to start this was to discuss studios. I mean, we all work in them. If we don't already have one, we're either building one, we built one we don't like. We built one that we love, but we've never heard a good one, so we don't know if it can get even better. And so on and so on. So I thought I'd start by introducing how I got to this space, because this is my 5th studio. This is my favorite studio. I love it here. If you can't tell, I've put a lot into it, and it's my favorite space to be in the city. But that takes me all the way back. I think it will be 10 years in June, so 14 years ago, where I started in Long Island. I had a studio in my garage, and it was covered wall to wall with Oralex panels in diamond shapes. We all know diamond shapes. Not quite sure why they were in diamond shapes. I don't even really like diamonds, but I built it. It was built to serve a purpose. I was recording college demos for my saxophone performance degree that I thought I was going to get. You know what I'm saying? So instead of my parents, who couldn't really afford to book studio time, book Long Island studios, they bought me like a Korg digital recorder and a Tascam 4-track. I had both of them. It was like we didn't know which one was going to be the right way to go. I actually found out I like the digital one better. I know that's blasphemous around here, but I just I don't know. I liked having 16 faders, even though they all did the same thing, and I had no idea. So here I am, 16, recording that. That jumps ahead to I go to music school, And then I hated it and realized that jazz performance and music education was not my jam, and I learned how to use Pro Tools. So, long story short, built my second studio, which is in Long Island as well, fully built out. My dad and I built it together, double walls, soundproof, 3 rooms, sounded what I thought was great. Addison, that's where I met this gentleman here, and John Graber and a bunch of people. And we built what we thought was a really good studio. And I remember, I was working with Nathan here, doing masters through Nashville. And he would say the mixes sounded good. I was like, cool, this dude who I think makes things sound good, sounds good. I thought it translated. Cut to 5 years later, we're gonna just jump up ahead. Nathan tells me that he is going to move to Los Angeles and that I should go to Los Angeles as well because my mixes were really pop and I should take a shot at mixing pop music. I was doing like really weird indie band shit. And then met Addison and we did some pop and wrote and produced some stuff together. So we head out to LA, build another studio. Proper build. 3 rooms, did all the double walling. Just 2 of us, we had a couple of hands of help here and there, but just 2 dudes building a studio. Room is built, press play, and I'm like, I don't understand this. I have no idea what I'm listening to after 5 years in another room. Granted, I think we took 3 months off building that spot. I didn't have any place really to make records. So I'm like, what? This doesn't sound good. So worked a little bit, did some stuff. Addison and I were working on a song. We take it to my Mini Cooper that we know really well. I've had that car for so many years, and we know it as a reference. And we're like, wait, that's not what it sounded like in there. You used to be so good. What happened? Those were his words, not mine. You used to be so good. But it was a translation issue, so something wasn't right. And then we went in, we did some tweaks and changed a couple of things, and then it got better. But then, jump further ahead, I meet Tony Maserati and I meet Spider at the same time. They come over, and Spider, I don't even know if you knew about unfucking back then, but you said, I got an idea. Why don't you take the desk and put it against that wall? Because at least for a time being, it will mimic, and it was switching 180, so it was a narrow wall. It'll at least mimic your Long Island studio where you had this really shallow space. You didn't really have time for the waves to develop. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, but let's try it. And I remember it sounding like significantly more like I'm used to, still incorrect, completely incorrect. There was nothing about it that was right at all. But I could at least get mixers across the line, and I had to pay for the new studio bill that we just put all of our money into. Then Tony comes over, and he just like, what's behind that wall? I was like, nothing. He goes, gotta move out of here. I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, there should be like sand behind there. It should be solid. And I was like, cool. I never built a solid wall in my life. I don't know. Come over to my spot. I'll show you a room. We'll see if you can afford it. It's like, all right, cool. Go over there. Couldn't afford it, but somehow we made it work and wound up at that studio. Studio 4. Spent 5 years in the world's tiniest box.
Least vibey
box. Oh, we made that shit vibey. Come on. That was all right. It had that IKEA artwork on.
We were vibey, the box was not vibey.
No, box was not vibey. But again, not putting 2 to 2 together until the other night when I was kind of writing this little story I wanted to intro with at dinner by myself. I was realizing Spider, the same thing. He kept making me move my desk around the room. We tried 3 different positions before we landed where we landed, which was the 3rd position that we tried. And this is with my old monitors, so this is with Focals at the time. Then jumped to PMC, kind of loaning me their prototype of the 226s at the time, because that was so long ago. Put them up against the wall, and like a whole new world opened up. And it was this, just things that I really thought I understood, I had no idea about. And it was really eye-opening. So then, through PMC, introduced Rory, who used to work in PMC. He would come in with Maurice and set up big rigs for Tony, because Tony refused to get rid of tannoys. He just like needs those tannoys. But for big projects, like we did, I think it was Lady Gaga was the first one, and Beyonce, and Rory and Maurice came in to put this big rig in the back wall for Tony. And
it was the front wall at the.
Was it the
time.
front? Oh, it was the front wall.
That's
for
when
the first
Rory
gig.
and Maurice told Tony to flip his whole room.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Then telling Tony Maserati, that's been in the studio for what, a year at that point?
Yeah.
Maybe slightly less than a year at that point.
Year, probably, yeah, something like that.
Your whole room's fucked up. You're gonna flip your room. It's gonna sound better. Trust me. Just like, okay, I trust you. Like, it's weird. Some people are trusting and some people aren't, and that's gonna be the way it's gonna be. There's therapy for that too. But that's another thing. But he took the chance, and it was a world's difference. It looked odd the way it was flipped, and that still remains that way to this day.
Yeah.
But it was a bold move to reconsider. And bear in mind, like, I have a pretty minimal setup. Tony's rig is 32 hardware inserts with a huge Sterling desk and a Neve sidecar, and 6 power amps and like a ton of shit. It was a huge thing.
Yeah, poor Justin's not here tonight.
Yeah, why? I mean, he said he was coming. I don't know.
He's sick.
You got sick?
Yeah.
Wah. Sad. Yeah, that was before James' time. James?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's before James.
Yeah.
But the trust factor in that was really what landed home for me. And I think it was because at some point you realize that someone knows better than you do about something else. If, Rory and Maurice came in and said, yo, I really think that snare drum's got too much 3K, he might consider it, but he probably won't change it. But he's going to say your room has 180 hertz dip by 20 dB and you can't hear that. Tony's going to go, yeah, I felt that. I was compensating for that. You can understand that. And then we can discuss what it means to flip the room. So that happened. I think it was something around that area. It's like 100 to 200. Something, it was detrimental to the mix process for Tony's low end, which is really important, obviously. Tony's low end is the best. Then we jump back to here. And this room was empty. This room should, by all accounts, not sound good at all. Like, this place is wild. There's so much space, and it was completely empty. And I had decided, I know you disagree, I don't know if you disagreed at the time, you disagree now for sure, to buy this attack wall to just kind of put up a studio in this place and get to work, as I was spending all my money on the rent and I needed to, make records to pay. And it was a last-ditch effort to make this space, which I fell in love with when it was empty, come to life. And it did. Though we started facing that way, and something about the trusses, the building is going this way, so there was some weird shit happening this way, and Maurice and Spider were like, nah, we gotta try it this way. Turn it, all of a sudden we were working, records were mixed the next day. Unreal. Like, it just, the stress level of what could be from the studio process has been so clarified for me from the three of you, 2 of you here, and Maurice as well. So I thought that we should start with unfucking your studio. So, that's my long-winded story of 5 studios. I hope none of you have 5 studios. It's unnecessary. Really?
I would kill it just have 5 studios.
Yeah. Like
I'm from New York, man.
wait, like have 5?
What?
Like at the same time?
I'm building the 11th right now.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Wait, you guys should probably talk after this.
Yeah.
Something didn't work.
It's the whole city. It's not the city.
No, I know, just messing with you.
I tried 2 with them and then moved to Los Angeles.
So, to the experts in the room, when you walk in any studio for the first time, what's the first thing you notice?
It's always different. I mean, when we're walking in for the first time, if somebody says, hey, I'm having trouble with my room, and I don't know this person well, and I show up, it's really about the person. I think Rory's probably the same way. I mean, but there's so much happening at once. You rock up to a spot, you're thinking like, this guy makes pop records. What does this feel like? What is his clients experience when they're rocking up to this spot? You go in, what do you see? What's the gear in the rack? How's it set up? What story is this telling? I mean, it's actually probably more complicated than I even understand, like on an intuitive level, everything I'm taking in. But as soon as we start talking, I'm noticing how my voice is behaving in the room and starting to get a feel for the characteristics of the room. And also, part of what I'm doing there is trying to understand the person so that I can go as absolutely far into the process as we absolutely can, without destabilizing their lives too much, and finding where that limit is. And I'm driven to find that limit. I want to go, and I can be opinionated, and I can be a sort of purist about it, absolutist. But that sort of personal assessment, I think, is primary, because you can have all kinds of ideas about a room, but this person needs to live there. This is where they're going to feed their families from. It's important to people. So, there's this sort of global assessment that's happening, and it's all over the place. I mean, I think Ruairi has a more technical understanding of what's happening in the room, and I have my ears, from being a recording artist and being a producer and being an engineer and mixing and so I feel like I'm more of the user advocate. And Ruairi is more emphasizes on the way things are actually working in the room, the explanations behind what I'm hearing, and I'm learning from Ruairi all the time. But together, sort of negotiate these situations with people in their rooms and just try to go as far as we can.
Or maybe beyond. I like the bit beyond their comfort zone.
Yeah. No, we're going to push it for sure.
I heard a story recently where I went to a studio after they had been there, two friends, and they're like, Ruairi was like a cat. He kept jumping on the walls and pounding on things while Spider was talking and playing records. He was just like hit the wall like a cat.
When we do a visit, there's about 15 minutes in, I just go full Rain Man.
Yeah.
And Spider handles all social interaction, and I just start poking things and then usually at the end of that there'll be some awkward question. I'd say, when did but it'll be loaded, but like, when did you buy these speakers? And they say, oh man, I love those focals, they're so dope. And they'd be like, okay, so that's, now we know where we're at. Or whatever, you just kind of suss out their.
But have you tried? Have you followed?
You're trying. It depends. Like that situation, you had set us up, and you were like, "Hey, you should trust the guys." And we went in, so there was a lot of trust, and we could get to the heart of the matter. There's other situations where it's taken me, years to build up trust. Like you've got to, years and years with long-term clients, and you're trying to get them to understand, that you're on their side. But,
I mean, from the get-go of our relationships, it's always been, wait, what feels right and what makes the creative experience more enjoyable to be around for everybody, not even just you. It's for everybody. And that seems to be the studio's the gateway to that anyway. So, we should talk about that at some point. Table that for now. But I still want to know more about your kind of first experience in the room. How does it make you feel when you go into a room? Right off the bat, this is not doing anybody any good in here.
There's so one thing you don't want to do. It's like it's the same in mastering. You don't want to critique someone's shit if there isn't a solution. So if they're stuck there and they can't either afford or they can't move, or it's their mom's basement or whatever, you don't go in and shit on their basement and then say, good luck with that. You've got to your room is shit and you're going to feel bad about everything you ever do here. I'm out. You've got to sort of figure out what people's. We just had that and last week. We went to look at someone's studio and it was like, you need to move. Like you're going to move out of here. Because there's no fixing this scenario. But most times it's like there's something to do, and you're trying to gauge. It just depends how you come in. There's people who are. If you're dealing with some super high profile person, there's all these handlers or maybe dealers and minders who are like, oh, I wouldn't put your cup there. Rockstar A or superstar DJ B doesn't like cups on the left side of the desk. It's like, all right, whatever. And then other times it's, you're dealing with some kid who's just starting out.
Yeah.
So you're kind of gauging everything and appetite for change and just trying to see what's possible in a given space, in a given scenario with a given budget. You know, there's lots you can do for nothing.
Right. I mean, budget's a big thing, and you know, I would love people here and and beyond to kind of gauge what it looks like when, you know, what we can do without spending any money first. Like Spider's thing relatively recently has been pushing speakers up against the wall. Like, let's force some more low end and impact off the wall and like use that as the back. You want to talk about that at all? Like, what insight, like, why did you even start doing that anyway?
Oh man, yeah, because it became a reliable piece of advice, right? So most people, the conventional wisdom around speaker placement, it's like you should never put speakers within however many feet of the wall because of the boundary effect, and you know, there's something to that. But in most situations in these residential rooms or sort of not soffit mount build outs that most people are working in that I come across, just moving their whole listening position against the wall makes an immediate improvement, evens out the low end response, and gets them out of a zone where there's mid-range coloration and things. And so I can text this to anyone in the country,
right,
and reliably get a positive result,
right,
like in the 90 percentile, right? And that's an immediate trust builder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's a very simple thing to do. People can do it with what they have. Yeah. They just use the wall instead of pretending it's not there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the answer to everything, and some rooms are oddly shaped, and maybe it's not possible or whatever. But yeah, it's just from doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I started 2 years ago. Going into rooms all over town with the same speakers and the same DAC and the same tracks, and it just became this calibration of my brain and my body, my emotions, like my nervous system, to the way the speaker room marriage is functioning. Yeah. And most people who are off of the wall are sitting somewhere too close to the center of the room where there's maximum bass cancellation, and there's not enough trapping at the boundaries to keep that cancellation from happening. And so yeah, it's just like, it's a move. I mean, I don't want to say it's a rule because it's not.
Yeah, well, there aren't many rules.
But yeah,
I think there's math involved. But.
So how many people in the room have their speakers against the wall, and how many people against the wall? How many are like, you know, 3 feet off the wall or more? And everyone else is somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So I think that the reasoning behind putting the speakers against the wall is that when you pull speakers away from the wall, you get, you know, we think of speakers as, you know, some kind of flashlight that are sending, you know, sound towards us. And at high frequencies, that's true. At you know, 18K, it's like a laser. And as soon as you go off axis, that tweeter stops working very effectively at 18K at all. When you start going down in frequency, that widens more. And at a certain point, your speaker is radiating omnidirectionally. So at 100 hertz, if you've got a reasonably sized speaker, it's a sphere that leaves the speaker. And what happens is that when you're off of a boundary, if this is our boundary and the speaker is, say, 3 feet out, that sphere leaves the speaker and comes towards Spider, the listener, but it also goes back at the same time, hits the wall, and then we come back out of time, out of phase, and that causes cancellation. And it's very predictable, and it's very measurable and repeatable. And by going against the wall, we're sort of simulating being like what a flush-mounted speaker does, which is, you know, they call it infinite baffle, where you have the speaker in the wall, and you get a low-end lift, but you get a much more even response. And it's a win pretty much every time. What you will get is more low end, and sometimes that can spook people when you do it. With small speakers, it's often welcome, and with bigger speakers, you usually have control. You know, the second most important thing is what Spider said, is that a good rule of thumb is you never want to be in the middle of a room, where everyone is familiar. How many people know what room modes are, kind of just as a vague concept? You had the experience of walking around a room and suddenly there's no low end, or there's way too much low end. I've had, in really troublesome rooms, I've had, you're running tones for something, experiences where there's places in the room I can't stand to be. 80 hertz is like just uncomfortably loud, and I can find a place in the room where it basically disappears, and that's like a worst case scenario. So producer is sitting in the disappearing place, I'm sitting in the other one, and he's saying turn up the 808, and I'm saying no, you're out to lunch, like we got to turn it down, and that's a problem. That's causing friction in a session. So, but the middle of the room, in almost every room that isn't sort of perfect, is a problem area, because what happens is we've all had the experience, you take a bottle and you blow in it and it rings with a note, and between every set of walls or floor and ceiling, it's ringing with a note the same way, and it's a little more complex, but there are peaks and dips in that response, and there are sort of fundamental modes and secondary and whatever, but the simple rule of thumb is that if you're going to be in a space, pretty much any space, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the way into the room, and the same from the back wall, is going to be a place where the low end problems are kind of more predictable, more even, a little bit more balanced. So generally, if you said to me, hey, I've got a 12 by 14 by 10 room and I can't go there, I'm going to say, put your speakers on either the 12 or the 14 wall, we'll figure that out. You live somewhere between 3-4 feet in that region, and pull your client couch forward so they're not right against the back wall either, getting blasted with low end, and you've got a reasonable shot. How many people feel like they're sitting near the middle of the room, or how many people
a couple.
And it's working okay for you? Yeah. Sometimes the room is so small. Now this comes to the next sort of like rule of thumb, which always goes down really well, which is you shouldn't have a big motherfucking desk.
Yeah.
I think Mike Miller, you're my proudest client in regard to this.
Yeah.
I went to Mike's studio in Rochester. He has big PMCs, and he's got a room that was built out, that was designed by someone, and big PMCs. And when I went there, Mike had just bought this dope new
custom made.
Was I calling it, the aircraft carrier or something?
Yeah.
It was this giant
thing that you could call it.
Giant black. It was this giant black super trick. It was like $4,500 or something, custom made. You were
Proud.
clinging to this thing.
Yeah.
This was your lifeline. And I was listening to the room when we were moving speakers and measuring, and the desk was just fucked up. I mean, it was, and we'll talk in a second about why. But I was kind of saying, yeah, we're going to need to get rid of the desk, and I was joking with you about it, but it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And eventually, I just said to Mike, hey, just maybe you could humor me, right? Because I came all this way from LA
To Rochester.
And it was fucking enormous. It, like, just turning it in the room was like turning an aircraft carrier. It was like this giant thing.
Yeah.
So eventually we got it with the gear in it, and we just dragged one end of it out of the way. And I mean, I'd been at you for 6 hours at this point.
Well, you were talking about burning it.
Yeah, it was sometimes a
Turning
sacrifice.
it was like the easiest thing out of
Yeah, it's
all.
cold in
Yeah.
Rochester.
And we turned it, and you sat down, and you were like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
Wow.
Yeah, done.
It was like a whole other universe.
It was instant?
It was like
Yeah.
mind blowing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's, the thing Spider talked about, trust is everything. And we either have trust going in the room because someone heavy like you has recommended us to these guys at studio you talked about, and they're like, we trust Ron with our lives, so if he says you're okay, you're okay.
Well, at least with their mixes.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust there that you've earned, and you shared that with us.
Yeah.
So other times people are, very cynical, or they've been burned, by people who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you have to earn trust, and sometimes you just have to show people what the difference is, you know.
Can I ask can I have some examples of resistance that you might be met with?
Well, I mean, this sunk cost thing
Sunk cost is
that
everything.
Mike was so good about.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I just spent such and such having big name so and so do this room.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite register what you're saying, right? There's kind of dissonance. I think that I don't know. Like I don't really try to psychoanalyze people in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, like I can't actually understand people's motivations really.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't. We don't even know our own, right? But I think that's all part of finding the limits of what you can do in a situation. And sometimes it's like, well, I guess that's it. You
Yeah,
know,
you
and
won't get
and
called
you,
back.
and you leave, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
You try to state your case, and you try to make it, and you try to state it in a way that they'll understand. And sometimes you're just not cracking it open.
Yeah.
You know, it's not for everybody.
And it's just the same with mixing or mastering or recording. Some clients are not for you.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not the guy or the girl for them, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you build trust, and it's a lot of different things. It's people you know in common. It's music you play. You know, if you roll into a hip hop studio and start playing Brahms,
Yeah.
no, you know, maybe it'll work.
They might flip that down 2 octaves and
Yeah,
put some
maybe,
drums on
yeah,
it.
maybe.
Well, yeah.
Just saying. I think I've done
but
it. I don't.
You know, you're looking to kind of get some kind of resonance going and build some momentum. And usually there's some quick stuff you can do to show people what's up. The desk thing,
Right.
the desk thing is something we come across over and over. And another kind of rationale besides the sunk cost thing is, but you know, Tony has a giant desk, or you know, whoever, insert name of hero here. They're using it, or they're using, you know, sucky speakers,
Yeah.
whatever, and they're doing great. And it's like, well, yeah, they're
Anomalous.
anomalous. They're
Yeah.
you know, they're these people, the Spikes and the Tonys of the world. They're one of a kind.
But then you're telling that person that they're not one of a kind.
Well, no,
They're a
it's
different
not
one of a
somewhat-
kind.
Yeah.
You know, I have no idea often
Well, yeah.
where they fall in that continuum, but
Sure.
what I do know is that following, you know, the path of someone who's one of a kind is often not the way to,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you're disagreeing with the logic of because they did it, I can be like
Yes.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
But that seems to be a safe space for people to go, especially on Gear Sluts and where we learn about.
It's a kind of religious view.
Yeah.
It's somebody like Tony has been in compromised acoustic environments his whole career, right? But he has such a connection to the music and to people that he's managed to make it through that gauntlet and come out the other side. And what you don't see are the thousands of people who burnt out, who didn't survive that process.
Mhm.
And so if you're thinking about, you know, if I had a teenage kid who wanted to be an engineer, would I say, hey, you should get some tannoys, and you know, that'll be like your best way forward? You know, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, I would have some sort of default standard position, and you know, we're talking about engineers. We're not talking about artists and people with subwoofers on rattling shelves and all the fun, chaotic things that happen in spaces like that. But for an engineer to have a clear view into a window into the world of the music, you know, that's why we think of sort of like a default approach is kind of at the core of what we like. We like ribbon mics, and we like tubes, and we like, you know, the things we like. We like other things too.
Yeah.
We like toys.
Yeah.
We like Fisher-Price gear. Like,
Yeah.
we like anything that's going to be a vibe, but as a core sort of approach, you want clarity.
Yeah.
You know,
I want to hear what you have.
you don't want to be looking through a funhouse mirror and trying to have a room that's like a funhouse mirror, and then to find the random speaker that is a funhouse mirror in the opposite shape.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, like this never leads to clarity.
Yeah. On that note, just you know, getting the mix yesterday, beautiful song, beautiful production, beautiful arrangement, done by people in this room, and just like having the clarity made me able to do the least I needed to do, which was, if you look at the vocal in the session, there's no plugins on the vocal, and it sounds so beautiful because it was recorded so great. And if I had an improper listening environment, I might be like, the vocal needs more top end. It's like, wait, well, how much absorption do I have in my room that's telling me that the vocal doesn't have enough air on it? I didn't have to touch it. I ran it through some tubes, made sure it was all leveled out with some clip gain, and that thing sounds great. But it was because I'm in a space that I could hear that clarity of what not to do. Granted, sometimes it's what to do, but a lot of the times it's what not to do at a mix stage when the producers are great and you're so zoomed in, you're in that space, in that world. You normally want to do less, and I think this plays a big part in that.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, Rory and I've spent the last couple of years trying to understand what it is that we do. And primarily, the way that we are oriented when we go into a room is to eliminate doubt from this person's life. And like Rory said about, you're not just going to trash the room and then leave, because now you're just leaving him with a bucket of doubt, right? We're not going to do that. Confidence can be seen as the absence of doubt, right? So you had the confidence that I watched you move through that mix. It was really fun for me, watching you just roll through that mix without second guessing, responding, having a feedback loop with the actual material, emotionally, feeling that. Josh and I might whoop a little bit in the back when something good move happens.
There's a couple of whoops.
A little something. Mike and I were getting down on the sofa quietly. But sometimes not so quietly.
But they're the most subtle moves.
Yeah,
you can tell.
Ooh.
Yeah. Tiny little things.
But when you're trying to eliminate doubt from someone's life, I mean, this goes back to the assessment thing, and I mean, sometimes we'll get a call from somebody and they'll say, I'm having trouble with like 50 hertz. I shot my room, and they're expecting us to come and solve 50 hertz. And when we're asking them about their 5-year plan and where they're trying to go in their career and like what their blue sky thinking is about their life, and they may be taken aback for a second and not understand why, but we're thinking about what to spend money on, what's the better compromise. We're juggling the workflow with the acoustics, and there's a lot of stuff to juggle to figure out what the best move is for someone in order to eliminate doubt. And I think if we're going to do our best in the situation, we really have to take that time to understand, maybe this person is doing this thing now, but they really want to be doing this other thing. How can we, in whatever moves we make here in the studio, build a bridge toward that thing and help them accomplish that thing? It's a sort of win-win attitude that also is like, oh, my homie's selling this thing, you should buy that, and like that'll save you money on that, and then this, and this is something that Maurice, it was like this sort of force for good in a lot of people's lives by making these sorts of connections, and I've been that way since I was a teenager in bands, and I've always played this role in my little, whatever my community has been. It's not just about 50 hertz, it never is.
Yeah, it never is. So on that note, and back to kind of the desk thing, Dave just kind of had he had a little remark of, well, it's what I can do. And okay, so that is what we can do. What else can we do? And you were going to go into the desk thing.
So the desk thing. So, what does a desk do? It's a lot like that boundary thing we talked about earlier. But when you imagine we have speakers, the perfect speaker and the perfect mix, and we're outdoors. There's no boundaries. You sit there 3-4 feet from the speakers. It's perfect. Great. Now we get in the real world and we need a place to put our coffee, our keyboard, or our mouse, or maybe a console. And what happens is you have that direct path from the speaker, and you have the reflective path off of the console, or the desk or the the Sterling or whatever, and they're out of time, and it causes like when you see it, I've shown people the measurements. When you see what it does, it looks horrific. It puts these 1K, 2K, 3K, these narrow, ugly dips, and in I was just, one of the notes I made today is something that people have said to me before is, yeah, but the Beatles, they mix their records on, these old wooden tea chests with whatever fucking speakers in them, and that was cool. Music was different then. Music, there was a ton of space, arrangements were everything. Now, everyone here has put their hands on a 200 channel session, and it's a clusterfuck of trying to get too much shit onto the record, right? We're all dealing with too much stuff. Every genre has now got the extended low end of hip hop and R&B. Everyone's trying to do that on rock and Christian music and jazz. Every record is right at the limits of level. So we're in this situation where we're being asked to do a very heavy lift every day in the studio, and we need to trust. And for example, when you think about trap music or hip hop music, the snares often are very aggressive and very filtered and kind of narrow. And there are situations where that falls into one of those holes that you've created with your desk. Now, sometimes you go in and it's a dude with a ton of gear and they need it and it's integral to their workflow. But most times, like I just did a room last week for a client, and he had a Sterling modular 3-bay, and I'm looking at it and it's like patchily filled with a few bits of gear, and I'm like, do you use this summing mixer? And he's like, oh, I don't even own it, bro. I was like, what? Like, what about this one? No. So I was like, what do you use here? It's like, well, the Apollo. But he was like, but it looks legit.
Right.
When people come in, right?
Right.
And
that's reasonable.
Yeah, it's reasonable. It's reasonable. But, so again, then the next question is, well, how often do people come by? Maybe 10% of clients come by. Okay. So it's a balance.
Asking more questions.
Yeah, we win some, we lose some. And not everyone should get rid of their desk, but a lot more people should have smaller desks.
Right.
And it's fun watching the sort of wave break.
The desk is the best desk wave.
Yeah, farther away from us, because we've been pushing for this for a minute. I had a Sterling modular in my last studio, 3-bay, and I had it filled with gear.
Yeah.
And pulled it out of the way, and it's like, oh shit, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, sold the 3-bay and went back to a single bay and put whatever the other gear off to one side. It's just better.
So, as an exercise, could one simply just move the desk to a side,
yes,
and press play, and challenge themselves to hear the difference?
Yeah, so that touches on something.
Please.
Which is kind of an overarching point, is that not everyone knows what good is. And that seems ridiculous to say when we've got a room full of
engineers.
Engineers. Yeah. But not everyone has a reference point for good or correct. I don't want to say flat because that's kind of horseshit, but not everyone knows when they've got it or when they don't.
Or how good it can be.
So, but I will say what I encourage people to do is, some people you just can't do this with because you say, hey, you should try it with and without. And then they call you and they haven't slept for 4 days and they're like, bro, I'm A-Bing and I don't know. And you're like, okay, you're chalking them off the ledge. Some people just aren't suited to that kind of thing. But if you feel like you've got the personality for it, I say to people, pick 3 tracks, first 30 seconds, three tracks that you know well, that maybe cover some different ground, and roll them first 30 seconds, and then as quickly as you can move the desk and do it again, and just see what you hear. I just went through it with Justin, who isn't here tonight, and he was just setting up a new studio, and the desk is going in and there's not much gear, and it's like, well, why are we doing the desk? And he's like, what? All the usual answers. And I was like, can we hear it without, can we do it? Maybe not today, there's a little bit of resistance.
Right.
And I just on Instagram yesterday, I see a photo of him with no desk, and I was like, but he tried it, and he's like, it's better, and maybe in a while I'll need more gear, and
then put it on the side.
Maybe,
just put it down there.
But
you can go walk to it.
Does
anybody even do this? Do they really? Sorry, console mixers. Do you really?
Console mixers.
But like
He says
the
with
comb
disdain.
filtering doesn't get in the way of what's happening. You're like, I think that's better, and you're back here. It's
like 5 feet over here. Like, oh yeah, that's on the right.
yeah, it's not.
Can I interject something that Chris Tavron has talked about?
Yes, please.
So he's a proponent, similar to you, of having a smaller desk.
Which I just got a smaller one yesterday, by the way. It's even smaller.
Right. Okay. Yes, yours desk is slightly smaller. The point being,
Who's got the smallest?
when he talks about the good thing about mixing on a console,
Yeah.
to him, I don't know, I haven't mixed professionally on a console previously, but to him, the idea is that you're moving around the room. You're getting to this end of the console, you're getting to that end of the console, you're getting a different picture of your mix because you're physically moving around. You're not staying in one sweet spot. Not to say that I know this to be a good idea, but that was an argument he made for the benefit of it.
It's a valid argument. However, what you're talking about is creating a composite model of your mix in your head where you're never actually hearing it at one time.
Right.
Which, is there some cognitive load there that's unnecessary, that's getting in the way? I don't know. I mean, there's probably someone who could speak to the neurology there and the way the brain works. That does help, I think, when you've got that big reflective thing, like attached to the speaker.
Yeah.
I think that would help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
That would help in that circumstance, but would not be like
And
as if it
also,
wasn't there.
Just for those of you who aren't aware, that's not his preferred method of mixing.
Sure.
He's not mixing on
Yeah.
console.
Yeah. I mean, mixing on consoles, that's a topic for another time.
Yeah,
So-
agreed.
But that leads us to another point that was on the list, which is, you go in rooms where people have 7 sets of speakers. And they're like, well, when I get it to sound good on all of these, or kind of sound okay on most of them, and it's like, if you ask, this room, hey guys, how do I get to Staples Center? And 7 of us tell you different kind of lies. No one really tells you the way to get to Staples Center. But you're like, okay, so John said go here, but he said go the opposite way. But he, he's a more honest dude. Like, fuck all of that noise. Like, as a way of approaching getting to where you want to go, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, it came from there are these like transitional eras in music when music was getting louder and busier and more complex, and people are for the first time putting near fields on bridges. That happened. That wasn't the thing, and then it was. And there are these moments where stuff shifts. But as a way of as a template or a choice to make when you're setting up a studio, having lots of different lies is not a good approach. Right. I'm not saying this to you directly, but what I do think is useful is having limited bandwidth versions. So there's something to be said for a mono auratone, maybe under the desk, maybe on top. There's something to be said for something around the size of NS10s that kind of rolls off at 100-ish or 80 and shows you that band limited thing, and then something bigger if you can do it. Not everyone can do it. Knowing what happens when the mix doesn't have all that juicy 40 hertz and 50 hertz stuff, that's really important, more now than ever with phones and stuff. But the idea of just all of these, I mean, I have to be careful that I don't accidentally say names, but I go to rooms and it's like, they're like, yeah, I've been in a room where they had the dangerous monitor controller, so we're off to a bad start already. And sorry to all the dangerous monitor controller owners, but those things,
Don't be sorry. Don't apologize.
They fucking suck. Then there was a 3-way Coleman switcher, and then there was another 3-way Coleman switcher linked off that, or 2-way, whatever. And it was just this massive, well, if you press this button and hold this leg up and then turn that knob, this speaker will come on for a second. And it was just like, crock, 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 and then hot, 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 and then hot, hot, hot. And you're kind of going, well, I have no idea like what any of this means. This is none of this, and I know what the record sounds like. So it's just like, there's got to be a better way.
All that's an attempt to solve a problem, which is not having this free-flowing feedback, emotional feedback loop with the music, right? There's something in the way. So I need this other thing to make up for that deficit. And it's sort of like two wrongs don't make a right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean, like a lot of people haven't heard one set of speakers or one room or one listening scenario that actually works.
Yeah.
That is close to as good as it can be. And once you experience that, it's like, oh, it's like my body's feeling things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do a move and I know what just happened, and I'm ready for the next thing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's this, you like watching Jon yesterday tumble through that mix just effortlessly
Mhm.
was really refreshing, because we haven't done that in a
I know,
second.
we used to do it all the time.
I haven't
Yeah.
had the privilege of being on your couch for a
I
minute.
mean, it's like one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I encourage everybody in the room to find that situation,
Yeah.
one way or another.
Right.
Like seek it out.
Well, also that goes back to, oh, well, Tony uses tannoys, right? Like that. Oh, I've seen, when I'm younger, I saw every engineer has 3 to 4 sets of speakers. Like,
Sure.
this is the way that it's done.
Mhm.
We're supposed to have, I mean, then you were talking about, well, yeah, it's nice to have a speaker that doesn't have the juicy low end. So iPhone, it's like, okay, we'll stream to your iPhone. Mix on the iPhone. Like, mix it on your clear set of speakers in your room. I mean, I do it all the time. Stream to the iPhone. Cool. Hear the bass. Cool. You got the kick. Cool. Vocals not too loud. Okay. What else? But what else do you need to know other than that? Because if it's going to sound good on big speakers that have clarity and depth to them, and small devices, what's the in between? The Prius. Cool. Call your friend with a Prius. Get in the Prius. If you have a Prius, awesome. I was in Dallas Prius the other day, and it sounded really good. Thanks for doing that. I haven't been in a car test in years since I moved downtown. So
You could put a Prius here.
I'll put a
Probably
Prius.
room.
But all of this is not to say that people can't have idiosyncratic ways of having
course.
that emotional connection to the
course.
music.
Yeah.
I mean, this is for people who are struggling,
Yeah.
right? I mean, maybe struggling is too strong a word, although I enjoy those situations, those relationships a lot, because they can be super rewarding when you unlock something for somebody who's super driven, really creative,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
really good at it, and they're just banging their head against the wall, and you can kind of turn the key for them. It feels really good.
Yes.
But sometimes it's subtler.
I think there's huge upside to limiting creative options.
Mm.
But when you get to the having less choices of synths or guitars or plugins or whatever, that's good. It focuses you on actually creating. But not knowing what you're hearing, that's not useful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a mastering engineer, so I don't need to hear that well.
Yeah.
Wait, it's really
So
that? It's
there-
that a
So
ris-
people, I mean, this is.
There are
this is
so
a-
many
it's a-
interlocking
It's an argument that you
themes,
hear
and
a
we're
lot.
gonna sort of touch. We'll loop around and kind
Sure.
of revisit. But something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. I've been doing some form of all this stuff for 25 years, and I'm thinking about the record business that I wanted to get into, and it's just gone. Like the one that I wanted to join in its entirety does not exist anymore. Like the career I imagined is gone.
Right.
But something that I think, a narrative that's sort of grown up, and it's very clear why, is that somehow we do this stuff, and that we have control of it, and we can make it, and we can wield it, and we can forge it. And really, my experience, all of my primal, like life-changing musical experiences, nobody did it. It just happened. It wasn't something that I've had the experience of putting great musicians in a room with the right gear and a great song, and it going super wrong.
Yeah.
I've had the experience of super hungover, like I'm going to vomit in a bucket. Musicians with the wrong mic in the wrong room recording the take, the one,
Yeah.
where you're just like, holy shit, right? Music shows up, real music shows up when it shows up. And the thing about having a corrupted view or a blurry sort of tenuous grasp on what's actually happening
Yeah.
is that these moments can come and go and you won't know it. Like when real music, when real artistry shows up, you need to know it and nurture it and step back not start scrolling through the plugin list and go, I got a dope fucking lo-fi plugin for that. Like, you need to just let it happen and enable it. However, that might be fucking a little hoop from the couch, or it might be, you know, patching in the right piece of gear to build on it, whatever, the momentum in the session. But if you don't know, if you're not connected with it in that visceral way, then, you know, and I think we're moving to a place where, not moving, I sound old now because I'm old, but we're in a phase of music where the idea is that everything is constructed Lego style, and there isn't as much room for real magic to kind of happen. You know, and I think good monitoring can help with that. You know, with knowing when you have the performance, knowing when it's you know, and it just opens you, I think, to that. You know.
Wow, yeah, that was fantastic. Lego style audio creation has never been my favorite, and I found my way in it, and I do my best to deconstruct the Lego feel in some way, shape, or form, because that is 99% of what I'm getting, and that's the first thing that I'm always aiming for, is that transition from part to part, that nothing really changes, but something has to change emotionally. And I think that's what you're noticing a lot of the times when you're sitting. It's like, I'm trying to find that one thing, and it's usually a subtle thing. And if there's too many tools or something in the way, you're gonna miss it, and you're gonna just let it be what it was. And it might have been okay at the time, but this kind of music that's all stacked up 8-bar loops at a time, there's ways to make it not feel that way, and I think a lot of people are leaving it feel stagnant. I mean, that's what most rough mixes feel like, is the producers are so zoomed in to, like, did I do a good job in the verse? Did I do a good job in the chorus? Did the A&R like this? Like, you know, did it get across the line? That we have to, as engineers, see that last. I mean, people always joke it's the last 5%. I don't know, one of yesterday's mixes I think I did like a 120% overhaul on. And the other one I think was a 5% upgrade. You know, I think it was completely different. But it still had an equal flow to it and an equal lack of disturbance to getting from A to B at the end. Besides the insecurities of, oh my God, are they gonna like this? Like, this is so different. Oh my God. But that's never gonna go away from me. Like,
that's Tony echoing in your head. Going far from the rough.
Oh yeah. One of them is so far.
But this gets into a deeper level of what it means to be an audio engineer, which is this capturing of magic and the emotional availability that it takes to be in touch with what you're listening to. Right. And when we haven't slept, and you know, ambient stress levels are putting noise in your nervous system, or there's some stuff going on in your life.
This fucking thing.
Yeah, that, you know, there's like this, this is also part of the scenario when you're going to a room. Like, first thing you're noticing is like, is this person comfortable? Is there a way they can be more comfortable? You know, some clients, I focus less on the gear and more about their sort of daily lifestyle, you know, and it becomes about, well, how can I help bring order into this situation? Dude, you need to get rid of all this gear. We need to clean this up. Let's clean this room. Let's do a fresh start over the holidays. You need to hire an assistant.
Right.
That assistant needs to show up and do this with us and take ownership of this room, and we need to have Castelli's assistant come in and train this dude on templates and workflow and file management and the thing. And then, you know, it's a very personal thing for all of us to think about how we can make ourselves emotionally available, right? To be authentic with ourselves and to be honest with ourselves.
Well, you're talking about a holistic studio life approach. You're talking about coming at it, what is it like to be in the studio and also be relatively healthy and mindful of what's going on, versus the head down, I'm an audio engineer, so my life doesn't matter. But as long as the producer and the artist and the A&R are happy, then that's cool, and I don't have to be happy because it's my job title. And,
sure. Yeah.
You know, that's been the grunt work of the engineer for so long, and I'd like it to shift, which is why I cook Persian feasts for engineers. But you're a huge catalyst into why I even thought it was possible to let that, let that shift and let my my job kind of step out and say, well, this is what I do. If you don't want me to do it, that's fine too. But this is how I'm going to do it, and I might take Sunday off. I might not work after dinner or something.
Or I might need to charge more, so I don't have to work so many hours, or whatever the formula
Yeah, well, that's
is.
different. But yeah.
I mean, whatever the
Sure.
whatever the balance of factors is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were a huge part of it for me for so many years that it feels good to attempt to share the wealth of knowledge that you have about this, because it really isn't about the room. Like it is. Fundamentally, it is the space that the music is created in, but it's a bit deeper than that, like workflow. Maybe we should have a whole month on workflow. I don't even. Anyway, I can. I'd like to. I'm a super workflow geek, and it's what makes it possible to do so many songs in a day. It's minus the speakers, which helps a lot too, obviously. Damn.
Can I ask
Yeah.
Yeah, please, James.
you talked about like speaker position and like a desk and desk position and a lot of things. I'd love to just hear any rules of thumb about treatment, like room treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I mean, you can go on this. It's super. So let's assume that we're starting from basics, and maybe there's people in here who know less. So we're going to start build up from basics. It's super deep. I mean, I talk to people, and they say, hey, my mixes aren't translating, and you say, okay, tell me about your room, tell me about your speakers, and they're like, bro, my room is treated. And in their mind, treating is like this binary thing. It's like it's a 1 or a 0. It's a light switch. Not treated, treated. Right? And it's like, wait a second. That's not how it works at all. And they're like, yeah, I just fucking went nuts with whatever, the RLX or the I've got loads of shit or whatever. And
Diamond shaped.
I would say that if you've already treated your room and we come by, the likelihood of us taking stuff out of it is higher than us adding more.
Yeah.
Very often. So what happens, in a lot of rooms, like I'm lucky enough to work in a room that's treated, that was built from the ground up, and it is as comprehensively sort of designed and treated as is possible. It's cutting edge for what's possible now. Most rooms we can't do that. So what we need to do is, we've got an imperfect space, and we're not in a position, because we don't own it, we're renting, or we don't want to drop 120 grand on it, even if we do own it, or whatever. We can't do it. So we've got to work with it on a budget. And what we're trying to do is put the speakers in the right place, put you in the right place, and then we're looking, the analogy we often use when we go in rooms is, look, that first couple of hours we're in a room, it's like when you get a new mix and you're pushing faders to figure out what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go in a room, there's a same Joni Mitchell track I use every time. It's a weird track, but it's got these horns and drums and really deep, really wide, percussive, got low energy. Tells a lot. And I put it up, and we listen, and it sounds however it sounds.
Yeah.
It's fucked up. It sounds good. It sounds narrow. It sounds whatever. And then it's like, well, why? Why does it sound like this? So it's like, okay, I know how all the speakers sound. I've heard them all. Okay, so it's those speakers, it's that deck. We're here. There's a window here, but there's an open door here. The room is shallow or the room is deep. There's a big, giant diffuser in the back. See, I'll come back to diffusers in a minute when I get mad. And, so we're trying to figure out why. And when you start pushing faders and you start seeing, okay, what are all the contributing elements here to this overall picture? We can't change a lot of them. So, I can't move your back wall if you're in a rented room in North Hollywood. It just is. I can move you, I can move your speakers. And then what we're looking to do is find a balance. The room's not going away because, we can't treat the room out of existence. So we've got to play with what we've got, and we've got to balance. Generally what we're trying to do is where you are turn down the room, because there's a phenomenon when you go, and it's hard to put into words, but when you listen in a room that's not dialed in, and where the room is too live and where the room is talking, it's like you're listening to the first rundown of a mix, and someone is just like tapping you just the whole time, and you're like, could you please stop doing that? The room is involved in the conversation, and there's a weird, you see this thing when we treat a room and the treatment goes up one by one. The cloud goes in first reflection points. Usually we're listening and measuring at that point. And as the picture is coming together, you see people physically change their demeanor. Mine never does, because I have the worst posture ever. But you see normal people, their demeanor, they're just like, and they're just like in it. And it's this kind of ease. There's less, because literally their brain is doing less fucking math to decipher what's on the record and what's the room doing.
Right.
Is that janky verb the snare or my restroom?
Yeah.
Like, they're doing less work. Less cognitive overload, as you say.
Yeah. They're finding more and more about this load all the time. I mean, we're taking in music in separate tracks in the brain, and the brain is putting it all together.
Yeah.
It's not a simple thing to just listen to music.
So,
Anyway, I don't want to sidetrack.
Yeah, no, you're good. A very important concept to think about. A lot of us work in small rooms or smaller rooms, and very simply, in this space, do people know or have heard of like the Haas effect, or the idea of it? So the Haas effect basically is, it means a lot more than this, but the idea that sounds, reflections that come back to us in less than 20 milliseconds, our ears fuse them together with the original sound. So if you're in a small space, like that boundary, I'm 6 feet from it. If I was to hit a snare now, the first reflection off of that boundary, my ear maps that with the original sound of the snare. I hear it all as one. So there's cancellation, and it's just, if we put the snare in the middle of the room and I hit it, my brain separates the room sound from the thing. So if we look at 20 milliseconds, that's basically any boundary 10 feet away from you. Now, in a lot of rooms, you can't get, most people don't have a 20-foot wide room, and they certainly don't have a 20-foot ceiling or a 10-foot ceiling so that it can get 20 milliseconds away. So the first thing we do is speakers in the right place, you in the right place, a cloud, and then treat the first reflection points. And those often as comprehensively as we can. So it might be a 4 or 6 inch trap off the wall if possible. The cloud, the more you can come away from the boundary, the more effective it will be. But there's a balance point. You don't want a big high ceiling and the cloud like just above your head. It feels goofy. You don't want too much of a kick in it, but you can put a little kick in it. So usually that's a kind of a balance of like how it functions and the aesthetics. After that, the back wall, depending on how close it is, if that's closer to you than that 20 millisecond window, then you want to treat that, reasonably well. 4 inch, 6 inch stuff. Sometimes you can build out. Something that's counterintuitive is that what you don't want to do is completely. I've been in rooms where it's like they'll cover the back wall entirely in 2 feet of stuff, soft stuff and fabric, and there's a weird thing that happens. Our hearing didn't evolve for making trap records. Funnily enough, it's all about hearing threats and opportunities, for hunting and what the saber-toothed tiger is going to eat us. So our ears they're looking for information from every direction, and if they don't get it, they turn up the gain. But the problem with our ears is it's not a volume knob; it's a multi-band dynamic EQ. So if you put your ears in a situation where it's forced to turn up the gain, your response is going to start skewing. And what happens when you go in a room where the front wall is reflective and the back wall is completely absorptive, you get this weird, your brain someone is telling you go left and right at the same time, and your brain doesn't like that. And there's an overload of sort of processing it. So generally, what we're doing, which feels kind of counterintuitive to a lot of people, is not going crazy on that back wall, because I want some of the wall to speak. And then after that, most of the positioning of the panels in a typical, like if you're spending, say $3,000 on panels or foreground or whatever. We're listening, and often we'll have an idea of, okay, we're going to do this, and we'll end up using less or putting them in different places, measuring, listening, and looking for a balance. You're looking for a musical balance, because we can't make the room go away, so we want to just play with it in a way. And something that, say for example, something like SonarWorks, which is another thing I can get mad about in a minute. Something that SonarWorks does is it's all about frequency response and this beautiful, pretty picture on the screen. And the way we hear is the frequency response is just a small part of it. How the sound evolves over time is a much bigger and more important part, typically. So you can be in a room with a perfectly flat line where the time domain response, which sounds kind of, bullshitty, but where the time domain response is just all kinds of fucked up. So yes, within the window of the measurement system, which might be 100 milliseconds, your frequency response is balanced. But after 100 milliseconds, 50 hertz and 80 hertz keep going for a fucking week, and 100 hertz is gone at 120 milliseconds. Your pretty line doesn't show that, and how that feels when you play music, what you end up with is a kind of a moving target, where yesterday's record, because of where the 808 was sitting, you put it here, put the snare here, vocal here, feels great, brought it to the car, boom, done. Today's record, because the 808 is tuned differently and maybe sustains a little longer, you're feeling good, you make your mix, you bring to the car, it's a fuck up. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. What we want to do is build every day on your sort of natural intuition, so that when you reach for a knob or a fader or a fucking plug-in, that you get what you expect, and that it translates to the world the way you expect, So
you ended at first reflection points. So what my takeaway from that is that you're saying less is more most of the time.
Yeah, often.
Or more than what one would think that they need to do to their room.
Well, the
based on photos.
The prevailing logic on gear sluts is you can't overtrap. You can never trap too much.
I mean, you can overeat. I mean, we can overdo a lot
of
things.
Yeah, we need
Everything
the room
can
to
be
kind
overdone.
of breathe a little and just sort of feel right. And that isn't, if you haven't done it 100 times, that maybe isn't as easy to figure out.
Yeah.
But
I mean, when we're in the room doing it, and the process is always really fascinating to me. It's like mastering, because we're listening to mastered material, and you're sort of mastering the room. And so when you hear a problem and you find the right panel to go in the right place, and you solve that problem, sometimes you go a little too far, and you say a little closer to the wall. It's like you're pulling the EQ back a little bit, and then the next thing reveals itself. Just like when you're EQing, it's like you pull down that 400 hertz bump. Now all of a sudden this like 2.5 thing's bugging you.
Yeah, right.
And there's this process of just dealing with the things that bug you by ear in the room, like a mastering engineer.
Right.
And it's easily to be heavy-handed. And this is the thing where you see people buying panel packs, and there's this formulaic way to put it up, and it just never turns out. I mean, it's a roll of the dice.
Right.
And it's again, even we have to be emotionally sensitive in the room, because I mean, we can talk about frequencies, but really it's about like, are we feeling the record the way we should?
Yeah.
And every room's going to have a different characteristic. Like the PMC studio in Highland Park, we have one of our bigger rigs, and the room was sort of unfortunate dimensions, but it's a cool situation, and so we worked pretty hard to make it work, and we made it better. But it has this very warm, kind of glowy low end, and it's very unique to that space. And if we were to spend maybe another 80 grand, we could have done a little more to tighten that up. But what we did was deal with the room characteristics in a way that just kind of let it be what it is, but just bring it down relative to what you're hearing from the speakers. And all the rooms are like that for us. They are what they are, and you can't. If you fight it, it starts to sound unnatural, and then like Rory says, it's this like annoying thing. so there's always this sweet spot in the process of balancing the room. Rory likes to say balancing the room, and that's really what it feels like.
What does it feel like when you go into a room and you say, "Oh, this room works"? When was the last time you had that experience? And did it feel like it works because there's output from the room that's working, or that the room was kind of great and magical and was what it was?
Lucky.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's just lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dimensions, like Rory was saying about the way the rooms ring and the 3 dimensions, sometimes those things don't stack on top of each other because of the dimensions.
I mean, I would say
And
that
it spreads out a little more.
I'm really lucky up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's pure luck.
Yeah.
This place is crazy.
It's a lot of volume.
A lot of, yeah.
Yeah.
James, did that answer your question at all?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
did you have something specific that you were getting at that I didn't
Well,
cover?
You totally no, like as far as like a rule of thumb, you absolutely answered. But right now, while you're talking about, like first reflections and stuff like that. I was curious, what do you do for that? Like, what do you use tube traps, or like do you use something? Do you suggest something?
If you were Mike Miller asking me the question, I would reply with bookshelves because of that. I don't know who saw fucking Pensano's place this week.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Jesus Christ. Sorry to all the Christians in the house. That was a shit show. Bookshelves, no. Like, what you want to do is you want to, as much as possible, delete those first reflections, particularly if they're close. If the first reflection is that wall, I'm less concerned. If it's that wall, I need to make it go away because it's in that sub 20 millisecond window. And you know, I think everyone sort of intuitively understands that we're looking for a kind of symmetry in the room. It's very weird to be closer to one wall than the other. And if we are, sometimes you are because there's a doorway or something you can't avoid, we really go out of our way to delete both walls. Like if the information from those walls can't come back to me at the same time, I need to turn it down as much as is humanly possible, you know? And that might mean deeper panels further off the wall, you know, going more floor to ceiling or whatever.
But it's typical panels, like Roxel, you know, rock board, like 4-6 inches deep and some distance from the wall, depending on, you know, just depending on the situation.
There are all sorts of trick things you can do, but they get very expensive very fast, you know, for like membrane absorbers and these things, VPRs and these different kinds of pressure-based stuff, but you just don't see them in typical, especially not in kind of rented rooms, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe in proper build-outs, but again, you know, I gotta be careful on this one. I did a studio, came into a project halfway with someone that I'd worked with before, and they'd had someone design and build out a studio in a giant living room, 800 square foot, maybe 900 square foot living room, high ceiling, 14-foot ceilings, so I don't know, maybe 50 by 20 something. It was a big room, and this guy had built out a studio supposedly to mimic their old studio, which they loved. So he built a kind of a smaller kind of shell, but not really a full shell, and he had all sorts of things that came from acoustics books in walls with kind of ideas about why they might be there, and you know, lots of money, lots of time, lots of effort and care even, but just the wrong things in the wrong place, and it just didn't work at all. Like it didn't work so badly that we ripped it all out. 150 grand of work out in the yard in piles, you know, and started over. So in the kinds of rooms that we're all dealing with, you know, I have there's like 3 levels. There's kind of what Spider and I do week to week in the kind of, you know, I won't say zero, but in, you know, 0 to 30K, 25, 30K, normal rooms, maybe rented. The idea is that some of the stuff will come with you. That kind of window. There's a window between sort of 25, 30K and 100, where I'm calling another friend of mine, Kyle Mann. We're designing maybe proper build-outs, usually in buildings that people own or long-term leases. And then above that, I'm working with Thomas from Northward, who did the room that I'm in.
Right.
So that's for people like Zed or Sonny.
Yeah.
Sterling, or those kinds of clients, big build-outs.
Yeah.
So there's kind of 3 tiers, but as Spider says, for the world most of us live in most of the time, it's the same stuff. It's like GIK or the basic panels that you can get.
Yeah, that are affordable.
Yeah, they're affordable, and we use a guy in town called John Hunter.
Yeah.
He's great.
Can we go to the diffusion thing?
The diffusion thing. So, diffusers, almost. There are some exceptions, but very few rooms I've ever been in that I was working on did the diffusers survive me being in the room. They're very rarely the right thing in the right place doing the right thing. They're off, like, mostly they just look dope, cost a lot of money, so they must be good, but they're not actually helping. Most of the stuff that you can buy online, like if you can hold it in your hand and it isn't 18 inches deep, then it's really for visual. It has almost no effect. Anything that's 6 inches deeper like that, it's working at 2, 3, 4K, and the pattern, the way that a diffuser works, the way that it spreads the energy is based on the pattern, based on the mathematical formula, and it's in small rooms it's very rarely useful. So generally I would rather, I did a room last year for a guy, and he had been given a plan by Westlake or one of these dealers, and it was like it had $2.5 grand of diffusers, because studios have diffusers, right? And then there was a drawing of like, well, we'll put panels here, and then where there aren't panels, we'll put diffusers. So it's like 2 over his head, like in a apartment.
Yeah,
like
I've
just
seen
kind
it.
of, yeah.
I've seen it.
And it's just like, hey, let's not do that. Let's do that and get rid of your Focal speakers. That's the second dig at Focal tonight.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep coming, people.
Keep digging.
We're going to sell your Focal speakers. We're going to get some better speakers, some simple but effective treatment in the right place. All in all, he spent less than the original quote, even including my fee and the time we spent, and the result was like, I would think better,
Yeah.
So, in general, most diffusers are not helpful. If you don't have a Jedi level acoustician doing it for a really good reason, then you don't need it. Just give me bare wall. Bare wall is fine, or a bookshelf actually, or guitars or some synths is fine. You don't need, And the way I know this is, I sound like I'm just sort of busting out a lot of these sort of definitive things and saying, well, black is black and this is how it is. Every room I go in that I'm working on, the first thing I'll do is cover them up and listen to what they're doing.
Mike Miller.
So it's like, yeah, Mike's room in Rochester, there was some very expensive, very beautiful diffusers that were built right, but sounded bad in the back wall. And what did we
put couch cushions in front.
Couch cushions or something, yeah.
Clouds in the back.
Yeah, and it was the clouds, from the
clouds from
ceiling.
the other
Yeah,
room.
there was too many clouds on the ceiling and diffusers in the back, so we took some of the clouds, covered the diffuser. It's like, that's better. We should do that. And it, So it's from listening. The room I work in has 5 diffusers, and they're very specific. There for a reason. They do what they do. If you cover them, it's worse. But like I say, that's a Jedi level dude, not the guys at Westlake. All you want is just the text the next day saying, just took the mix. I had a client who he would get his mixes to the halfway point and then take his laptop to the car and finish the record in the car.
Yeah.
Every record. And which is insane. And spent the latter half of the day with him, listening to records, feeling them out, making some tweaks, and said, tomorrow, 3 hours in the morning, start a new mix.
Right.
Just listen to a couple of refs in the morning, but no more referencing while you're working. Put them, just do it, and go to the car, call me, and let me know what you hear. And you get the call, and it's like, dude.
Yeah.
And that's all you need. That's
Yeah.
the result. Can we touch on the SonarWorks thing?
Yes.
No? No?
Sure.
No?
Sure. Brief.
Brief.
I'm fine with it. Fine to talk about.
Yeah. So, who here is using room correction?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to admit it now.
Okay, 4 or 5 people. Okay.
Anthony at home?
At home.
Yeah.
Only at
So,
Yes!
Jim,
Drag.
I haven't heard any rig I've probably put my hands on with my reference material 60 or 80 instances of room correction. Different Trinovs. I've gone toe to toe with the head tech guy at Trinov for a day for an A-list money no object client in New York, and super reasonable guy. Every question I had, every intuition I had, he answered. We went all day with it, and at the end of the day, the Trinov was bypassed and the client went on without it. SonarWorks, Dirac, the IK Multimedia one, they're all the wrong approach to the problem, and I just sort of would vote strongly against them. There's no need to go too deep with it, but there's lots of reasons why. I had probably the only, I came up in Ireland, I moved here 10 years ago, and why I'm so sort of, I have so much empathy for kids on gear sluts or people who are misguided by bullshit advertisings and whatever, is that I was that guy for the first 15 years of my work life in music. I was on an island in the middle of nowhere with no one to learn from, and Spider and I were talking about it recently. When I wanted to find out what a U47 sounded like, so my vocals didn't sound good. I was recording. I was not good. I rented a U47 from another country so I could hear it and go, okay, well, now I know what it sounds like, and it still doesn't sound good, so it's something else. It's a bad singer or whatever. I was very isolated, but I had one mentor, and he told me, maybe 8 years back, he's like, this room correction thing, it's just better. Just try it. So I got the package that he had, and I went deep for maybe 2 months. And the moment of truth was that I was working on this fiddle record. So I used to do a lot of Irish traditional music from home with like all the A-list people playing folk music. And I was working on this record, and it was like fiddle duet or something. And I pressed the space bar, and it was like diddle 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 ding. It was like, what the fuck is that? It sounded like a triangle, like ringing for 10 seconds. And then I would play the music again and stop it. Dong! And what it was, which most people don't think about, is that these, we don't hear it in normal use, but when you EQ, when you have a filter, so say you take a 2K boost with a Q of 10, and this narrow, nasty peak, right? You shouldn't do that. But if you did it, and you were somehow able to put a short pulse into it, it rings for a significant amount of time. We don't usually hear that because it's hidden behind the music. That ringing is always happening. But in a room correction software, these programs like SonarWorks, they often will do very narrow, peaky cuts and boosts, and those things ring and resonate and just create all sorts of havoc. And I did the whole measure in 8 places. I went deep with it for months, and I'm a strong advocate against. So we don't need to go there much more than that, probably.
Wouldn't now that you got me all into it, wouldn't those dips, they're dynamic and they're shifting while working? I've never seen this. I've never used one, so
No, they don't shift. Yeah. But the problem is that
they're fixed points.
They try to correct the room response with EQ, but the very first rookie mistake they make, and pretty much every package does this, is the biggest problem we face often is not so much peaks in our response. So yeah, you've got a little bump at 80 or whatever. The problem we face is these giant suck outs. So anyone who's measured their room, you're feeling pretty good about it until you see that measurement, and then it's like, what the fuck is going on at 120 hertz? There's a huge, crevasse. And these room correction software, you do the sweep, they see this 25 dB narrow dip at 120 hertz, maybe caused by the floor bounce or whatever, and they try to EQ back in a correction for that. And the problem with that is that what's happening in those situations where you get these very narrow cuts is that energy is leaving the speakers and reflecting from different surfaces, and it comes back in different at different times and in different phases, and it sums together. And sometimes when you get these very narrow dips, the energy is just gone. So you can imagine if we have very simple math of +1 is coming from here, -1 is coming from here. When they meet, it's gone.
Yeah.
We have 0. There's nothing left. There's nothing to grab hold of with the EQ. So if you have this narrow dip, say a 20, which isn't crazy, a 20 dB dip, and you put 20 dB of boost on it, you may get like 2, 3, 4 dB of correction, but you're losing 20 dB of headroom in your speaker. So your speaker
That's
at
what
120 hertz is working 20 dB harder, and it will cry uncle way sooner, have more distortion, more,
Yes.
And then when you move to the part of the room where, so like in a typical small room, say 12 feet deep, when you get out of that place where there's this narrow dip and you get back here, you sit back in your chair, now you don't have the 120 hertz dip, you have just this crazy 20 dB boost.
Yeah.
Because the EQ is actually working at
Yeah.
that point. So it's just a bad idea.
So it fixes it in maybe one spot, and it's not really, it's adding distortion because the peaks are so high.
It's the wrong answer to the problem.
That seems like pretty detrimentally wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Happy now?
I have a question.
Yes.
What's up?
This isn't like a very technical question. It's more about kind of like feng shui, which I know you guys like really specialize in.
Oh, yeah.
And in saying that, I go to a lot of different studios, whether I'm freelancing, whether I'm engineering there, or whether like we're working on a long-term project or a short-term project. And some of the staples that are always the same are always like the nice speakers, like there's the PMCs and the ATCs and the like system as a whole is usually kind of like is the same. But one thing I noticed that varies a lot is like the aesthetics of the studio. So like we're working with producers that are like, you walk in and it's like kind of really dirty and the carpet's like old and it's like, okay, it's like kind of gross. But they're putting out these records that are like winning Grammys and they're still like, they've been in it for 10, plus 20, 30 years and they're still making these records that are awesome and people still want to go there. And then you go into studios, let's say like maybe John's, where it's like kind of, it's a little more clean and you feel kind of like, you feel like a little more cool and like it's like a little more like, I don't want to say hip, but it's kind of hip. It's like kind of more modern and like that. And as someone like I'm like cross my fingers hoping to maybe get a room within this month. I've been thinking about like what I would do with that room aesthetically because there's already speakers, there's already a rig, there's already that, and I can hear if the room sounds bad. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna move shit around. Like I know how to do all that, but for me, when I'm going to a new space, I usually like bring like some string lights and I'll like put a diffuser in there and like that's like I'll kind of get comfortable that way so I can feel like I can work long hours. Like do you guys, is that like specifically on a person by person basis when you walk into a room that you're like, this person is gonna be here? Like do you gauge that on personality or do you think like is like a minimalistic approach better or do you guys think like, is it up to the person? Is like less clutter the answer? Or, because for some people I feel like it doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter where they are. Like they could be in a sterile hospital room or they could be in a room with like 80 vinyls on the wall that's just like so cluttered and they can just zoom in and just work wherever. And I just want to know like what your opinion on that is. And is, like Spider, you were saying that's something you think about when you walk in and you like gauge someone as a personality.
Yeah.
Like do you have a like preference of what you think like a normal studio for someone would be aesthetically?
No, I don't think there's a normal. I mean, typically, if you're trying to capture magic, less is more, right? So there's the perspective of the engineer, there's a perspective of the producer who's kind of an artist in their own right. Sometimes it's an artist's space, and the degree of chaos, I think, is highly individualized. It's some people you want them to have toys. It's good for them to have toys all over the place, and to spread out on the floor. But what you want to do is create a direct line from whatever it is that they're doing into the rig. Right, that's going to capture whatever that thing is. And so, yeah, it's always custom. And I think sometimes for engineers who are more providing a service and they have a clientele that come through, sometimes the engineer may need a little help understanding the needs of the client. Like we had one room for a composer, right, who was doing big kid series, Netflix, really successful, got a building, big open space like this, and was thinking about doing something like this. And Rory came through and he's like, well, what's your 5-year plan? And, you know, getting into this like kind of vision so we could understand what he really wanted out of his life. And he's like, oh, I want to be doing movies. And I was like, okay, now this changes this scenario. Like, we're talking about executives coming through, right? We're talking about where are they going to take phone calls? You're going to send them into the parking lot to get on the phone, you know? Maybe we need to build some walls here. Maybe we're going to build a control room. Maybe we need stadium seating in here and a big screen TV and speakers in the wall. So this is a cinematic experience. And I would say that's one of our more obvious success stories, if you're looking for one, is that this is all happening for this person, and this person is super excited.
Right.
And would have never thought about it. But that's more from looking at their, you know, empathizing with their clients and making it really easy for them to do business with him and to offer him things and to set him up for the future.
Right.
You know,
It's
a big commitment.
I'd like to add, because I think highly in the world of most of my clients. Most of my clients don't even come here. I would love them to come here, but people are on the road and all over the place and in offices on the west side. They don't want to come downtown. But I wanted to make a place where, you know, spending, well, all day for me, because I live here too, but it has to make me feel good, right? 'Cause if I feel good and comfortable, then I'm going to put the best, you know, work in front of me to my clients. And that might be what diffuser scent I use. It might be what couch they sit on. It might be the smell of the food I cooked the night before they come in, right? It's endless, right? So I think that it's 100% accurate that if you're freelancing and you're moving into a place for even a day or a week, you should bring your scent. You should bring anything. It could be a blanket. So when someone else is comping their own vocal, you're on the couch. I mean, absolutely bring yourself into the space. I can't imagine any other way besides bringing myself into the space. If I was booked out to mix somewhere, like let's just say Record Plant, they really needed me to mix at Record Plant for something. Whoa, Record Plant. Sorry, I love Record Plant. It's the only other studio I like. That's why I'm bringing it up. And I would, Josh and I would show up with a bunch of stuff. Like I wouldn't just roll into that room. That's not my story. That's not even the story of the artist. They don't even work there. Like that's not the space of anybody. So make it your own. So I say 100%. The space should be your own, and there should be no compromise. Though, if you want executives, right? Actually, let's leave executives out. Let's say, what's your clientele? You want Beyonce to show up, or you want Portugal the Man to show up, right? Like, Portugal the Man's gonna get down in any studio, could be fucking crap on the floor, they're gonna rock out, and it's gonna be tight. Beyonce's gonna turn around and leave right away without any hesitation, no judgment. She's not even going to think twice about where she just was. So understanding the client is really important that you're going to be working with on the regular, but do it mostly for yourself in your new room. And congratulations if it happens.
Yeah,
that's sick.
Yeah, and there's the doing it to make it comfortable for you and the people you're working with. But there's Instagram is a thing now,
right?
And it can be super valuable. And, you know, like the work we've been doing with Michael Morgan here on understanding the story the room is telling about you. Mm-hmm. And also, you know, so if you think about we're balancing acoustics and workflow and the convenience of getting the magic out of the air into the box and all the factors. And then we're also thinking like, is this gonna translate onto Instagram so that people understand, you know, so when they meet you or they're thinking about working with you, that they have a good idea of what you're about. And so that you attract good matches, you know, people, artists, clients that are gonna come to you for you. You know, it's like a big part of how you can be known. So, you know, lighting, and you can get to a really high level of this, I think, and I'm looking forward to more of that. But it's something that should be seriously considered, in the Instagram game. I mean, I think there's it's something we've all been thinking about, is like levels of support for audio engineers, and maybe new types of management companies that bring this sort of branding vision and this Instagram support and other kinds of, like, a whole kind of holistic support for an audio engineer in 2020. I mean, I think it's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that is all highly individualized. That's very much your story.
Yeah.
And the room is a touch point, as they say in the marketing world. It's one of the many touch points, and it's an opportunity. All the touch points you have, you're invoicing every time you interact with somebody in the outside world. That can be seen as a map of opportunity, all those touch points to tell that story. And the clearer that story is, the more it passes on from person to person. And there's something Steve Jobs was hugely into, is the clarity of that message to cut through, this noisy world we live in. It's even noisier now.
Yeah.
So.
Also, if you want any help, send me your Pinterest boards and I'll advise. Jasmine, you had a question?
So you guys talked a lot about when you're treating rooms about things sounding natural.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in my life, I think my brain has no idea what sounds natural anymore. I was just wondering, were there certain settings or even, I don't know, specific rooms that have really shaped your perception of what sounds natural and good?
Yes, it's a great question, and
Yeah.
something that we talked about. We got together the other night to kind of kick around, talking points for tonight, or just ideas. And when we said it earlier, it can sound kind of dismissive that sometimes when you send someone on the trek to find good in their room, they don't know what good is. They don't know where north is. So if they don't have a compass, then they're never going to get there. And for me, I'm at various points in my life, my understanding of what good was upgraded. So remember, I came from this small town in Ireland, and there were no studios. The first studio I worked in was my brother's, in a 10 by 10 by 10 bedroom with Alesis monitor ones. We were crushing. And the next studio was one that we built out, and no treatment in a giant, big box, with Genelex, and every mistake you could make, I made it. And the first time I ever heard a really great room, I went to London. So again, back to like efforts I made to upgrade my understanding. A client of mine, I had worked on an album with this band, and they were doing a reissue of an old album, and they were like, yeah, we're going to get our guy in London to master it. I was like, I'll take it. And I paid my own way, brought the files over so I could sit in his room. And the first time he hit spacebar on his Sadie rig or whatever, something I'd never seen, in this kind of small room, but it was built out, big B&W speakers, just immediately my understanding of what was possible was changed forever. So I was like, oh shit. So you can have impact like a live show, but all this detail and depth. Okay, and then I took that and built on that. And when I moved here, the PMC gig was 10 years of just that every day, of just hearing 100 versions of wrong. And the room I work in now is a benchmark for me. A room that Kyle and I did for Trent Reznor is another benchmark. It's a room we got to work quite a lot on. And then different aspects of other rooms. You might take a quality of the low end, or the imaging in certain rooms. But something we need to do for anyone here who doesn't have that benchmark is get you guys in front of a good room. So I don't know how we'll do it, if we can do
a conversations field trip. Where should we go?
Yeah, some kind of. We need to do some kind of thing where, and we'll talk maybe with Michael after and see how we can organize it, or some kind of group thread, or I don't know what we do. But we'll figure out a way where we can come, maybe in groups of smaller groups, like 5 or whatever. If people want to come and see the spot where I work, maybe come to PMC if we can dial that in for so that people who don't have a reference point, because the mains at big studio in town, whatever, they're not that reference point. One. And so find that. And
we're going to sort that.
We're going to try and do that for people. And then the other thing is just, I think, you know, if you're not recording, it's hard. I was lucky through a lot of live music to have like music happen in front of me, like very close, that sort of calibrated my understanding of like magic. It was like, oh shit, that's magical. Like Amy Winehouse, that close, it's in my brain, it's imprinted, you know, and lots of experiences like that. And if you don't have that, I don't know. That's just something you've got to find. I mean, my one piece of advice I give to every young engineer starting is find the smartest people. Like, forget gear sluts, just find the very smartest people you can. And just, like, when I moved here, I said to my wife, the first couple of weeks we moved here, I was like, I'd really like to work with this guy, Dave Collins. Sounds crazy, but, you know, and I work in a building with Dave Collins. I share a room with him. He was like the guy I wanted to be in the room
North
with.
Star.
And now he's one of my best friends. I'm lucky, but I also said it and made it happen. You know, I chased it. So whatever your discipline is, I think if you can find people, because smart people go to good rooms and work with good players and use good gear and have good taste, and you can not be the kid in Ireland trying to rent shit from other countries. You know, we're in LA, we're spoiled. You know, it's a good place to be if you want access to great. But there's also a lot of noise, as Spider said. You know,
some of the best monitoring experiences I've ever had aren't big studios.
Yeah,
they're little rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Treated right. Sometimes they're temporary situations. You know, like these gobos, kind of panels on stands. And
Mm-hmm.
you get the cloud over you, and the speakers are right there, and you got the good DAC and
Turn the volume up.
good material.
Feels good.
It's you can't unhear it, you know, because your body is just engaged in a way. And when you're hearing music and you're not being engaged, it's like somebody put you on Prozac or something. It's like, it's just not
Right.
Well, Prozac when it's the wrong thing for you. Some people probably better, but it just feels like there's something missing, you know.
Are there of everyone here, how many people think they've had that kind of benchmark experience, something that they're just like, holy shit, my brain is wired. They've heard it. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Tyler's heard it.
I've heard it. The your room and Chris Geringer's old room.
Yes, that's a great room. Chris's old room was really good.
Chris's new room is
Yeah, yeah. I haven't been in it, but it's.
And the studio smelled good when you left.
That's one thing you definitely got on lock.
Got the smells good.
You know every candle company in the whole world, I think.
I'm loving sitting right
Yeah. Just take another. Any more questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like talking about like I've kind of heard the myth, like a natural sound, and you see it in all these like kind of commercial studios, like a similar design, where you have kind of like padded walls, padded ceiling, you know, you can push in the walls, and hardwood floors, at least for a section of it. And I've heard people say, you know, that kind of formula gives you a more natural sound. I'm just curious what your thoughts were when people say that, or if you heard that. And I kind of see that at all these different studios.
I think the studios, the big sort of A rooms in town, they were designed in a different era to do a different thing, and how it really sounded, was just one consideration. How it worked for capturing live music off the floor, the fact that there was always going to be a console. There was no other if you needed to get mics into the recorder, you needed a console. So there's lots of compromises that sort of start stacking up on each other. So if we've got the console and we've got musicians, well, we're going to need glass. Okay, so now the whole front of the room is glass, and let's make it concave so that anything that hits it gets like focused back at you, in this ugly way. It's all these compromises. A lot of times in older studios in A rooms in town, you'll see the ceiling is hard. So you kind of go, well, wait a second, in my room I've got a cloud, Rory said I should have a cloud. Why does A and whatever have a hard wooden ceiling? And it's like, well, when rooms were designed in the 50s and 60s, amplification, like making shit louder, was hard to do. So if you had a 100-watt amp, that was pretty good. And what you needed was efficiency. So we had horns, very efficient, ugly as shit, but they're efficient. And you wanted to, the ceiling was kind of an extension of that horn. It was like, let's bounce this energy back to the couch. Let's use our 100 watts. Now we can have 2,000 watts in the palm of our hand, no problem. We don't need that kind of efficiency. We can be very wasteful and indulgent with the power. So a lot of the design, when I'm thinking of the big old rooms I've been in town, it's just they were working to a whole different set of compromises that we don't have anymore, you know. So, you know, definitely natural is not how I describe a lot of them, you know. They're fun places to be, and they can be inspiring, but they're not natural. I mean, I'm sort of going through the list in my head.
Yeah.
Not wanting to shit on rooms that people here probably work in, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
I was going to say one interesting point of kind of the older commercial studios with the glass and the the big mains up top and everything. I've seen, we've all seen a lot of those studios kind of go out of business or go under or change in different areas. One thing I've seen a lot of people do is, as they've sold their SSL and gotten rid of the console, I've seen a lot of engineers with like, the live room is now the control room because this room sounds a lot more natural, and we'll just use that for like a booth or a lounge or something.
Right.
So I've seen quite a few spaces where they'll like take a naturally sounding live room, sounds a lot better,
Yeah.
and turn that into the control room and just dump the old big console control room.
Nice booth.
Yeah. New booth.
For the mixer.
Right.
Booths for the mixer. Anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go.
man.
So regarding the console discussion, right?
Yes.
I've mixed on consoles for years, learned on consoles, and for so many decades, hit records that still sound amazing were mixed on consoles.
Yes.
And some mixers to this day, they're Hughes, or Vanny, or Spike, or a bunch of other guys still mix on consoles, right? So is there something about what say it's an SSL or a Neve, what maybe they're kind of giving you that maybe just a big wooden desk might not always have this theory that maybe all those hundreds of knobs add some type of diffusion or something like that, or is there anything to that, or even just the way the height and the distance of the speakers, like
The angle of it.
I thought that was something like when SSL went from the kind of the K super analog boards to the duality series. I thought that's really they really messed up. It was totally changing the height and the distance of the speaker. They've basically been used to for their whole existence, and then all of a sudden the speaker was lower and closer to you, and it's hard to mix on that board. So I was curious if, like, how those boards, was there something about them?
I don't think so.
I think it was what was available.
The nice thing about the SSLs is they don't rattle. Most of the Neves seem to rattle like crazy. And the one thing, going back to the desk conversation, what a flat surface between you and the speaker does is just cause comb filtering, and the frequencies depend on the distance. So the further that drop from the speaker to the desk and back to you, the bigger the difference between the direct path and the reflected path, the lower in frequency that first cancellation will be, and then they'll go up from there. But when you have a desk at home, if you've got something that you do need, what I've done more than once with like Sterling modulars and stuff, where people do want to keep it, is put a kick in it. If you can angle the face of the desk. I mean, obviously, if it's for your coffee cup, you can't have it at 45 degrees. But if you can put a little kick in it like this, that first reflection gets bounced below your ears, and it can really make a difference. Even like 7, 8, 10 degrees can be really helpful. So if you have got a Sterling modular with gear or something like that, and the other thing I've done more than once is you've got the 3-bass Sterling that people use, the Plan E or whatever, and it's got this sort of that V section, that V-shaped gap between the 3 bays, is just put something soft in there. So if you've got your your speaker here and that flat V section here, just a little cutout piece of RLX turned backwards. It won't go super low, but it'll help a lot. I used to do it on my old desk. On the back of it, there was a section that would reflect, and just killing those little reflections can really help.
Well, but this is true, but you kind of see some of that in those old SSLs. Like every SSL channel isn't flat.
Yeah,
it's all angled.
Yes, it's got the angle.
And all those knobs do
I mean, I suppose I've never tried removing them to see. It probably wouldn't go down well, but
You know what we're gonna do today? We're gonna take every knob off this console.
Come in with my wrench. It's like, I've got an idea.
Wait, that's a great.
They must have some effect. Definitely at super high frequencies they would, you know.
Yeah, very
but then
high.
at super high frequencies the tweeter isn't doesn't have that dispersion anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts, you know. And ultimately, you know, we talked about this recently with Tony. We were talking about, you know, I'm pretty cynical about what the way the music gear industry is. I can't remember which one of us coined this phrase, but we came up with the idea of the mixed down industrial complex.
George Hazelrig.
Is it? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So credit to George. It's so good. And there's a machine that wants you to believe that you can create, that wants to feed your ego, you know, and that if you just had speaker X, you know, compressor Y, or just fucking endless plugins, that you would get there. And you know, we were talking about selecting gear back when, say, Tony started out. When you got in the room to make a record, there was gear in the racks, and that gear had gone through a process. There was kind of a process of evolution that selected that gear in the room. So we'll imagine that in 1985 you go in a room to make a record and you're thinking about, I need an EQ for the mix bus. Well, what's going to be there? It's going to be a GML and maybe a pair of Pultecs. Is there an option I'm forgetting? You know, that's
Not
the.
back then.
Now, are they the only two EQs ever invented? No. Have different things come and gone? They did. They went in the rack. Someone tried them. Cleared them out and said, that sucks. Put the GML back in. Whatever. When you go in the room, when Tony goes in the room in 1985 to mix a record, he's thinking, I'm going to put an EQ on the bus. Assistant patches in the GML, the Pultecs, that's the one. So in choosing your gear, you were selecting from a menu that had been curated by the cost of making gear, by the expertise required, by the way the rooms were used. Bad gear was voted out of the rack, you know, by regular clients. And so you could kind of feel your way through gear choices. So if you wanted a compressor and there was 5 in the rack, you could patch them and move towards the one you like. Now there are, I mean, how many compressors on, you know, hardware compressors or software compressors are on the market? There are hundreds, and most of them suck. Most of them. None of them are truly awful. Lots of them are just kind of shitty, and then there's a few good ones. And so that process of like, well, you know, I'll just try one and pick the best one. How does that work with 500 options? It doesn't, you know. So we need a different way of making decisions, and, you know, finding smart people and getting good advice. But the other one is kind of thinking a little bit from first principles and kind of thinking about why, you know, why we would choose a particular piece of gear, and sort of maybe just think a little about who's driving when we're making our choices, you know. That's a topic for another night, probably. You know.
Yeah, I feel like we can use that to wrap up.
Yeah.
That's really important. I mean, the idea of asking why. Ask yourself why, ask others why. We had a conversation earlier, Addison, Michael and I won't go into what it was about, but the first thing Michael said was, why didn't you want to see her? Oh, right, it makes you think differently. Like, wait, do I ever want to see this person again? Like, what was our relationship then? What is it now? Like, why do you have a desk that big? Okay, well, I put my Ableton Push, my old MPC 3000 I don't actually use, the new MPC Renaissance that I sometimes use, and my Artist Mix, and the PreSonus single fader that doesn't actually work. I have all this on there. It makes me look legit because I have all this stuff, but the thing I use most is my trackpad and all my automation and my keyboard. So, but if you don't ever stop to ask why, you're just going to keep adding to the thing.
There's a lot of moves. There's a lot of standard moves.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are obsolete.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that there's, if you're a producer and you have every Juno ever made, every Korg ever made, and they're all vintage and they have this thing, they're in racks on the side, that's great. They're on racks on the side. No one does that stacked up in front of them. It would cover the computer and they would never
You'd
be
be
able to
surprised.
see. Really? All right. I imagine no one's stacking. All right, sure. Maybe. Sounds like a dumb idea. All I can say. But you see them to the side in
Yeah,
racks, and they're all
yeah.
patched in. The
Yeah.
workflow's sorted out for them. I'm not sure post console that we've asked mixers and engineers what we'd like our workflow to look like.
Yeah, like collectively we haven't figured out that we don't need all that
Yeah.
reflective surface in front of the
Yeah.
speakers.
I mean, even my mentor was the greatest mentor to walk the earth, as far as I'm concerned. Never really asked me about my workflow or how I'd like to pursue a career in mixing and what my desk should look like. It just never come up in a conversation. Yet it's come up in 90% of our conversations over coffee.
Yeah.
We could be talking about anything. We could talk about a podcast, and we relate it back towards what's on your desk somehow.
Well, Tony, it's very interesting that Tony has been maintaining a platform for him to serve his clients,
Mhm.
and there's never a time when there's downtime.
Right.
And he's maintaining that for them, and he protects that.
Yeah.
And so he sustains what works, right? If he's making money, ain't fucking changing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I have the advantage of being disruptive,
Yeah.
and you were at a stage in your career where you could afford it,
Yeah.
and so we could go there,
Yeah. So that was intentional.
Well, yeah, I mean, but those are again, you find the limits of where you can,
And
where
it
you
is-
can take people.
You don't always have to turn everything upside down. Sometimes there's a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Mhm.
There's stuff you can do. We've touched on some of it tonight. That's
Like scoot up against the wall.
yeah, and just get the right speakers. Don't have a sucky deck, and simple things you can do that don't have to cost a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And I see people, I would say, you really should consider getting speakers that don't sound awful, and they're like, no, bro, I can't afford it. And then you go back next week and there's a new Moog or something. And
Right.
you're like,
Yeah.
you can't afford it, or you didn't see the priority.
Yeah.
We can
Happens so often.
Yeah.
It does, and
Yeah.
we can sound really persnickety about these little details.
Can
And is anyone into backpacking or cycling or familiar with the concept of a weight weenie? It's like
Wait, please tell
weight
us.
weenies. These are people who in cycling who obsess about the weight of every component, and
Oh, okay.
it's just really annoying. But the in backpacking, the phrase "every ounce counts," and so if you're looking at a sleeping bag and one weighs a few ounces more than another, it's not one decision you're making. It's like 30 or 35 decisions like that you're making. And in the studio, all these little things that can seem insignificant and you can rationalize yourself out of all add up to a big thing. And it's actually not linear. It's this kind of like, once you get the source material and the source integrity and your settings right in Tidal, and your DAC and your speakers and the listening position and the lack of desk and the panels and the thing, and all of a sudden it's like you're in a different world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're locked in.
And it's, any of these one things we can sound really kind of like we're overemphasizing.
Yeah.
We have a way of talking really shitty DACs, which is like almost all of them. It's I can understand how that can sound off-putting and dismissive, but
Sure.
it's in the context of like all these little things adding up to something bigger than the sum of their parts.
And the comeback often is, but Spike, I don't know what DAC Spike uses, but Spike uses that shitty DAC.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, Spike is succeeding despite that DAC, not because of.
Yeah.
These are, again, you can't use these
Exactly.
these edge case people, these sort of phenoms as your template for gear choices.
Yeah. So, in order to wrap this, I want to go back to the disruption thing that you brought up about Tony and how you kind of found your way in there. Thanks for that. Thanks for unfucking so much of my music making life. So much of it. Most of my days are stress-free creatively because of it, and any stress comes from my own insecurities that compound and get in the way of the process. The speakers don't, the gear doesn't, the couch doesn't, the desk doesn't. the space doesn't. And you're a huge part of that, so thanks a lot. And thanks for doing this for us. And man, hit them up, ask them questions, because they got crazy answers.
So one of us needs to be the person who thanks Jon for having us, for doing this, for you know. I was thinking driving over about what you're doing, and there's the importance of the conversation tonight, because obviously what we said is hugely important, right? Yeah. But so there's that. No, but there's the importance of the conversations themselves that we're having here. But the fact that you're acting as a template for people to say, hey, you can take 5 people and you can go deeper, or you can take a group of 50 people and go deeper. This is really good. We need more of this in the industry for sure.
Yeah.
So props to Jon, and the food is not too shabby either. Right?